does this really mean anything for divisions among the Republican support in the midterms?
I don't think so. I mean, the Koch brothers had announced that they were going to look at supporting Democrat candidates, and they had put their money where their mouth was already. And the Kochs also. I worked at the NRSC in the 14 cycle and the 16 cycle. They were pretty active in the 14 cycle, but not really that active in the 16 cycle. I think it's kind of how they're feeling, and so it certainly would be nice to have it. If I was running the NRSC, I would always welcome it. But at the same time, I don't know how much effect it's necessarily going to have.
So, Steve, how about from your point of view? I mean, are you happy to have the Koch brothers going against the president?
Well, I mean, I think this is the beginning of the Republican Party standing up, the mainstream Republican Party standing up to President Trump and some of the policies that mainstream Republicans, frankly, have found abhorrent for their entire careers, beginning with free trade, which Republicans support. The president doesn't. He's starting trade wars all over the world. And, of course, attacks on institutions that Republicans have always supported, like law enforcement, the FBI. And I think the Koch brothers speak for many. They generally, put millions or tens of millions or sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars into campaigns for Republicans. And if they're going to make an evaluation based on who supports the ideals and principles that they believe, I think the Trumpian wing of the party is not going to do very well, and the Chamber of Commerce wing is going to do much better.
But Steve, the key question would be, will Democrats be able to capitalize on these cracks and fallout with the Koch brothers?
Well, anytime you have potentially hundreds of millions of dollars taken off the field, if you're a Democrat, that's a good thing. If you're Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, who's got a very difficult race, but she's a very good candidate, having the Koch brothers take their money and go somewhere else is a really good thing for her. If that happens with other challenged Democrats like Senator McCaskill or Senator Donnelly in Indiana or Joe Manchin or some of the others, it's a really, really good thing for Democrats. And I certainly hope the Koch brothers follow through and take their money off the field in some of those places.
Kevin, we were just talking to our trade reporter, Jenny Leonard, and she was telling us how this administration has continued to bash Canada. We're now hearing that they're frozen out of trade talks. These are pretty big distractions. I just wonder, what does the administration or President Trump have to gain heading into the midterms by bashing allies and getting all of these trade disputes on the table?
I think President Trump, one of the things you can say positive about President Trump is he definitely has his finger on the pulse of a lot of mainstream Americans, or flyover country, whatever you want to call them. And so, he really taps into a sentiment when he does these things and he stands up. I'm from Minnesota. People see him standing up and saying these kinds of things and saying that finally someone's standing up for America, even when they don't agree with necessarily the policies that he's implementing. It's one of the crazier things I've ever seen is how many people will say, I don't like the policy, but I like that he's doing it. It could hurt me, but I still like that he's doing it. And so I think President Trump sees this as a way of really riling up his base. And midterms are base elections, and he's hoping to get those folks out to vote for Republican candidates. It wouldn't necessarily be the way I would go about it, but he's the president, so who am I?
Kevin is really, really good, and that was a very good spin. But I think what you're looking at here is a situation where the president's base, which is only about 35% of the electorate, and the last time I checked, that's not enough to win most elections. He is appealing to his base, but if you look at white non-college voters, which were the people that moved from supporting Obama 2 times to supporting Trump and making his election possible, he's dropped 10 points of those people in the last month. And that's not a good thing for him. And a lot of those people are from states that Kevin just mentioned, my home state of Nebraska, Minnesota, other places in the middle of the country, which are now beginning to feel the effects of these trade wars. And it's not going to be pleasant for Republicans who support Trump if they're going to support these kind of trade wars.
Kevin, how do you feel about shutting down the government? The president now is talking about shutting down the government again. And typically when the Republicans have shut down the government, it hasn't worked out so well for them, as I recall.
No, not at all. We always get the blame for it. And I mean, it's like we can sit here, we can make the argument all we want. We can be on the right side, wrong side, whatever it is, we're going to get the argument. You've heard Leader McConnell say unequivocally, we are not going to shut down the government. The House has said we're not going to shut down the government. I think the president says these grandiose statements when he's working on negotiations. At the end of the day, he is a deal maker. He's a negotiator, and he's going to try to play what he sees as his end game from the get-go, and he works back there. It's happened every single time he's made a policy statement like this that I can see.
So Steve, that grandiosity, as Kevin calls it, that has worked out pretty well and appealing to the base. But to what extent is it really marshaling the Democratic base? To what extent are the Democrats really going to run against President Trump come November?
Well, I think that's exactly what you're going to see, and you're seeing independent voters. And you know, Kevin said a moment ago that midterm elections are about getting out your base vote. I think that's right to a point. But at the end of the day, the deciders in these things, as George W. Bush used to say, the deciders are going to be the swing voters who, frankly, sometimes vote for Republicans and sometimes vote for Democrats. Those deciders right now, it looks like, are supporting Democrats overwhelmingly. And if they're women deciders, oh my God, watch out, because they're not coming out to vote for Republicans and Trump lovers. They're coming out to vote for the people who are taking Trump on.
And Kevin, on that note, we are now expected to see President Trump headed to Florida this afternoon to stump for Governor Rick Scott. I remember earlier this year, he wasn't really keen on associating himself so much with the president. But at the end of the day, is a calculation right now for candidates that it's still better to stick with the president.
Well, I think, you know, if you have a primary, and Rick Scott doesn't have a primary to speak of, but he does have to get to late primary in Florida. So, I mean, I think that there might be some consideration there. But also maybe at the same time, he sees no downside because he doesn't have a primary. It's always an individual decision for your candidate and for either your district or your state who you have come in and stump for you. I think that the president realized that when he was running for office in 2016 when we were at the NRSC. He said, I get it. People aren't going to want me places. Just tell me where you want me, and I'll go there. And so I think that, you know, some candidates want him, some candidates won't. But at the end of the day, I don't know how much of a difference, you know, that will make. I think these are all, you need to turn out your vote. It is a turnout election in midterms. And Steve is right. You have to go towards that middle. You have to talk to them. And they're a tough person to reach right now. They're very segmented, and they have a lot of different beliefs and a lot of different reaction to what is going on in Washington right now.